Hi, very good evening. I'm Vijay Kalyan Jha and I welcome you to Grade Up. How are you all? This is the fourth session since 5 p.m. today. This is the second and the concluding day of this MBA 2021 conclave. And we have a special guest. I have a very different relationship with him. Anyway, we shall come to that later on. We have Vikas Lakhani, one of the co-founders of co-working space InstaOffice with us. How are you, Vikas?
Hey, very well, very well. Thank you so much, Vijay sir, for having me here. I'm doing very well. It's cold here in Delhi, but it's been a good few days. So thank you so much for having me. And it's fantastic to be with you after, I don't know, maybe more than a decade. Yeah.
All right. So we have a good number of young MBA aspirants. To start with, would you want to talk a bit about InstaOffice, the concept, and how popular is the concept here in India?
Yes, sure. So InstaOffice is one of the, and I must be honest, I'm the founder of InstaOffice. So there may be a little bit of hyperbole and exaggeration in my claims about the company. But just to sort of summarize, InstaOffice is one of the leading co-working operators in the country. We're currently in Delhi, NCR, Bangalore, and Hyderabad. So we are a pan-India operator. We started in 2016. And it's been a fantastic journey so far. To tell you more about what we do, see, when we started out in InstaOffice, I just left my job, and I'd been in mostly a reasonably good corporate career. So as disciplined as we are, I woke up in the morning to go to an office. So I had my dabba ready, but I did not have an office to go to. And many people like me, most people still need a place to get some work done, to have a productive day. So that's when I started InstaOffice, because there were a lot of people like me, early stage entrepreneurs or consultants or distributed teams of larger companies who needed high quality, good offices. And till that time, offices were largely these, big hubs that were being provided by companies, wherein you would go, drive down, take a metro, there would be a bus that'll pick you up. So the centralized concept of an office, which was being delivered by your employer, was something that we want to disrupt. To simplify, basically, InstaOffice is a co-working operator. Whether you need an office for an hour for one person, or you need it for 3 years for 100 people, you come to us and you can start working tomorrow.
Wow, wonderful. So in a way, presence of InstaOffice will certainly promote entrepreneurship, because there are many things which entrepreneurs will not have to take care of, right? They can straight away ask you people to take care of that, right?
Absolutely. See, being an entrepreneur is anything but easy. So you of course, you need a lot of resources. And that's where Office provides you three sort of resources. One is, of course, the physical resource, physical infrastructure. You need logistical infrastructure, which is all sorts of internet, office boys, reception, electricity. Having an office needs, you need to have a whole admin function to take care of an office. So the whole of physical, logistical infrastructure is entirely taken care of by InstaOffice. Plus, what I call, some people call community, we call intellectual infrastructure. When you're in an office, you have friends, you have colleagues, you learn from them, you grow with them, you make connections. I mean, most generally, you will find your next job through somebody you've known either in your previous office or school or college. So it's a personal relationships that you build, and that's a very, very important asset of any individual or a professional. So when you're in an office, you really grow naturally as an individual and as a professional, which is what is all missing when you're a single founder or an entrepreneur, when you start your journey on your own. So this is what we take care of. You just plug and play, you start working tomorrow, and whether it's physical infrastructure, logistical infrastructure, or it's the community, everything is taken care of. So in a way, yes, our essentially our motto, or our what we do is basically empower people to do what they really want to do as entrepreneurs.
Oh, great. So let's go back in time and talk a bit about your formative years, your schooling, the place from where you did your graduation and all that.
Yeah, so see, I grew up in Jaipur, and I must be honest, my sort of small town middle class values have helped me a lot throughout. I grew up in Jaipur. I did my schooling in Jaipur. I then did my BCom honors from Kirodimal College, Delhi. Post that, I studied in a school called HEC Paris in France. I did my master's in management from there. It's very much like what you have PGDBM in India. I studied there. The course was fairly unique. It had a 3-year course in which you actually spend what we call a sandwich year. You spend a year working. So you're not only studying, you actually go out and work. And that was a 3-year course that I did. And I finished in 2007. I started my career with a bank called Credit Suisse in London. I interned there. I started my career there. I was an investment banker with Credit Suisse. In summary, I used to do mergers and acquisition, fundraise, and strategy for oil and gas and energy companies across Europe. And these are my formative years, really. I mean, that's where I started from. Post that, I mean, this is where I started developing my entrepreneurial aspirations as well while I was in banking in London. Because as a banker, you really are running your own shop. It's a very, very, very independent career. And I had a fantastic time there. And if anything, I still miss banking. So post that, I worked for a late stage startup, worked with a fantastic entrepreneur called Rishi Khosla. And that's where I moved back to India. The company was called Copal Partners, which was eventually sold off to Moody's Corporation. And that's when I became a full-time entrepreneur as well myself. But I must add, when people say formative years, when you look back, you can, of course, make a complete story as if it was like a whole strategy or a plan that worked out for you. But I must be honest, a lot of this was based out of absolute whim. I still remember it was, I used to come to your classes in 2003, and there was this business world issue at that time in which there were these two lads standing in the cover page, and they talked about iBanking and venture capital at that time. I really did not know much about that at that point. But I thought I wanted to be an investment banker. I did not know what that meant. I did not know how to get there. But it worked out that way. Subconsciously, you start to make decisions which take you where you want to be, as when you've envisioned what you really want to do. And now when I think back, I remember in my MBA applications, I always used to end my application saying that, I have had my entrepreneurial dreams, which at some point I would like to realize. And I really did not know how I would do that. But every single one of my MBA or scholarship application had this thing. And it worked out that way in 2014. So I can really weave a story out of this. But as I said, a lot of this comes from as long as you can envision something, and subconsciously or consciously you start to make your decisions which add up to where you want to be.
All right. But going for MSc in finance from HEC Paris, okay, is not a very typical thing which people do. It's slightly atypical, right? So from where did you get this idea of doing this 3-year MSc in finance from HEC Paris?
So, see, as I said, so first, it is not as atypical now as it was back then. And I had to prepare quite a bit to actually, figure out how to get there. So as I was saying, once you figure out what you want to do subconsciously, you start to make those decisions. For one, being Indians, we're all cost conscious. I got great scholarships in HEC. Oh. So I was, that was already one big checkbox, right? Saving a lot of money. So I got some very good scholarships, both from the school and also from the French government. Second, as I said, I wanted to be an investment banker. HEC is known for it's one of the premier schools in the country. It's been ranked as #1 in MSc Finance for the last 7 or 8 years now globally. But their strategy, entrepreneurship, and finance are 3 great majors, fantastic courses. Second, a large part of investment banking in London comes from HEC and some of these 2-3 premier business schools. So that's when I knew that this is a school I wanted to go to. One of my very dear friends, much senior to me, had already pursued that career at that time. He was a banker in London, had gone to HEC. He guided me through the process, and it was a fairly selective process as it is today. And there's not a single bit of this I would not do again if I got an opportunity.
All right. So could you please throw a bit of light on the process also? What all you had to go through in order to get admission there?
See, it's a very typical global management school process which you have to go through, which is a GMAT, an interview, the entire profiling, the essays, then a board or whatever, like a group discussion. It was not so much as a group discussion as we see here, but meeting a bunch of very senior people, having sort of a board discussion with them, and multiple rounds like these. So very typical global management school process. And I should clarify, it is not really called an MBA, because MBA, the way we see, which is the American concept, you would see people with fairly a lot of experience, basically number of years of experience, they going into MBA, not like in India. So that's where the MBA track, as you would see in Europe, is people who are in mid-30s, late 30s, starting their MBA after spending many years in jobs. But like a PGDBM, MSc Finance, there is where you would see people with limited experience, like 1 or 2 years, and maybe in early stages of their career. So very typical process. So not that I had to prepare very differently for it. And also the course is entirely in English, at least for the first, at least a large part of that for the first year and a half is in English. Now I think in entirety that can be in English now. I'm too old now.
Right, because mostly people believe that most of the things which happen in France happen in French. All right, because they almost take that as a slight. Doing anything which has anything to do with English is almost an insult for them, right? But luckily, in your alma mater, right, it was very different. The entire course is in English, right?
Yeah, that is correct. So see, in fact, I must add, I went there because as an entire course was in English, but I did actually choose to do about 20 to 30% of my course in my major in French, because once you go to Europe, once you leave India, you start to realize, and particularly in Europe, you realize that language is more than means of communication. For us, English has largely been a language which, of course, helps you communicate, but it also signifies level of education that you've had. Just historically, it has been like that because it was more about access to education, right? But if you see Europe, language is so much more about culture. And if you really want to be an integral part of the culture, whether work or no work, you should be able to speak the language. And so I did the last 20-30% of my course in French.
Okay, but before that, you must have mastered the language also?
No, not really. Not really. I could fake it very well. I can still fake it very well. But I did the course a little bit of this 20-30% in French because my course was largely finance. So you're still dealing with fairly standard accounting and financial concepts. It's largely numbers. And the delivery is in French, which is okay. I mean, once you've spent a year and a half, 2 years in France, that is not so much of a challenge. I never wrote French. So that's what I was trying to say. Some of these flexibilities are brilliant in the school that even at that time, I could follow a French track, but I did not have to write my exams in French.
Okay. And how are you at French now? I read about it in your LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
Okay, that you are well conversant in English as well as French.
Okay. I'm reasonably okay, and I can read fairly well.
You still cannot write.
I still cannot write. And I could maybe back then, but now it's not at all. I would not dare to go there.
All right.
I'll make a joke of myself.
Okay. All right. How different is this MSc in finance from MBA in finance? Or is the difference only there in the nomenclature?
No, not really. See, in France, it's fairly different. Because as I was saying, MBA as we see it is a very American concept in France. And in France, they've set up some of the best schools for certain disciplines. So for example, for management, they have a bunch of these schools, just like we would have IIMs. For administration, they would have schools. For engineering, they would have polytechniques, just like we have IITs. So the course that we pursued, as I was saying, of course, the people you have there are fairly different because they don't come with those 5, 6, or 8 years of experience.